Welcome to this important dialogue and conversation. I am Raja Bhattar. I use they, them pronouns. I am an activist, organizer, author, and transformative leadership education consultant. I'm really excited to just be in dialogue and community with incredible voices in our movement right now, and artists that are shaping the way that we think about this work. As one of my colleagues earlier said, art is activism. And so I think all of us holding this space tend to have the opportunity to show up every day. And I used to tell people, you know, just by showing up is an act of revolution. Because if we're not at the table, we can't actually have a voice. If we can't have a voice, we can't actually create change. And so thank you all for showing up today. I really appreciate it. This conversation really is about helping us as artists and community members make sense of what's happening in this global movement that's happening, both around racial justice and the global pandemic and public health crisis that's happening, but also the generations and centuries of work that's happening. We know that the fight for racial justice and the fight for equal rights, the fight for gender equality, the fight for Me Too movement, the fight for LGBTQ rights, the fight for tenant rights and labor rights, these are not anything that's new of 2020. These are things that have been happening for a long time, and it's systemic and embedded into the work that we do. And so for us to show up in this moment, I believe is a gift for us. And also, it's important for me to think about, we are witness to this for a purpose. We are alive at this moment for a purpose, and we are engaging this work for a purpose. And so just really honored to be able to share the space with you all. Can we just quickly do a quick names and pronouns, and maybe one quick thing about who you are and how you are showing up today, just to kind of get people's names and spirits into the room. And I'll just call people just to kind of go in a circle for time's sake. We'll start with Lindsey.
Hi, my name is Lindsey Jordan-Powell. My pronouns are she, her. And yeah, I'm an actor, singer, and just love being an activist. Yeah, spreading the word about Black Lives Matter and just other types of activism. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Lindsey. How about Sunhee?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sunhee. She, her pronouns. I was in the 2019 production of Man of God at East West Players. I played Samantha. And I am also a media scholar, so I spend a lot of my activism talking about context and history and intersectionality.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Thank you, Sunhee. How about B?
Hi, everyone. My name is B. Vang. Pronouns are he, him, his. I am an actor, writer, activist, and former journalist. I am committed to social justice causes and movements, specifically in media, entertainment, and wider society.
That's great. Thank you. Ashphord?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashphord Jacoway. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the wardrobe supervisor down at East West Players, as well as I do costume design throughout the LA theater community. I love activism, and I use my platform within the cosplay and anime community to be able to talk about diversity and inclusiveness within our communities as well.
That's great. Thank you. Dekontee.
Hi, my name is Dekontee Tucrkile. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I was in the 2019 production of Mamma Mia, and I have a huge background in musical theater, but recently I've become more of a content creator, using social media to ignite social change and engaging with community to make a difference tomorrow.
That's great. Thank you. Reena?
Hi, my name is Reena Dutt. I'm a director and producer. I first was involved with East West Players back in 1998 when South Asians started getting involved there. And I use storytelling as a means for backdoor education in terms of activism and my art.
That's great. Thank you, Reena. Jenapher.
There we go. Hi, I'm Jenapher Zheng. I'm an actor, writer, artist. I graduated CalArts with my acting MFA in 2016, and that was also when I acted in the East West Players theater show Kentucky. And I primarily use my fandom in geek culture and work in immersive theater to think about inclusivity and diversity. And I also do volunteering for social change.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenapher. How about Trance?
Hello, my name is Trance Thompson. I am an actor, writer, producer in a band. I just was John Wilkes Booth in Assassins, and I work a lot in working with children and in interpersonal connections.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Trance. Megan?
Hi, my name is Megan Rippey. I am an actor, writer. I graduated from CalArts in 2013. And then in 2016, I did the play Kentucky at East West Players. I have been an activist for a long time, proudly getting arrested. And I am also very interested in the intersectionality in general, but for me, an intersection between justice and sex work as well. And I'm trying to use my platform as a burlesque and pole dancer to create change as well.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, Megan. Napoleon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Napoleon Tavale, pronouns he, him, his. A proud Samoan American, born on the island of American Samoa and raised in the great Midwestern state of Minnesota, where a lot of things have happened in the past month that has resonated with me. As a storyteller, I am a teacher, an actor, a director, writer, producer. My education is from Whittier College with theater arts and the University of Virginia with an MFA in acting. So I'm very interested in using my platforms as a teacher to implement, starting, because I teach from young kids. So I'm interested also from Trance. I think I heard you talking about teaching. I'm interested in how to implement what's going on in the world into teaching our youth of today. And I'm involved with the East West Players Peak program. Very happy to be here with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Napoleon. How about Christopher?
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to be here. Okay, so my name is Christopher Aguilar, he, they pronouns. I am a mental health worker, actor, playwright. I go out into schools and mental health conferences with a play that I've written called Stand, a play to help break the stigma of mental illness. And it was actually developed at East West Players. And I also acted in La Caja Fall back in 2016 at East West Players.
Thank you, Christopher. Elvira.
Hello, and my name is Elvira Barjau in English. And I started working with East West Players last year in Mamma Mia. I'm a graduate of Berklee College of Music. I'm a musician, I'm an actor, I'm a singer, dancer. I produce and direct cabaret for myself and for others. I use that as a platform to connect with the audience on deeper issues, on a more human level. I think art is an amazing way to reach people at their core, because at the end of the day, we really all are the same feelings. We're affected by all the same things. And when the audience is able to see and hear, it's like they're getting that experience or permission to feel things themselves. So I think it's a great way to connect with people and a good tool to use for change.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How about Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Dang. I'm an actor, director, going by he, him pronouns. I was an actor in the 2018 production of Kaidan with East West, and then later in 2020, now the assistant director for Assassins. Since 2013, I was the producing artistic director of Reppey Ensemble Theater Group, and I use my platform to touch on the intersections of culture, identity, sexuality, and I explore it through the medium of immersive theater. Immersive theater.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And Nardeep.
Hi, I'm Nardeep Khurmi, pronouns he, him, his. I'm a writer, director, and actor, theater and film, and an activist. And I try to incorporate that into my work by creating inclusive and representative narratives and trying to help the local community and get involved with local government.
Thank you so much. Really, I'm so excited about just the sheer talent that's in this space right now. And thanks to Andy for at East West Players to kind of pulling all of us together. As I wanted to just kind of start off just recognizing that we are not showing up as experts in necessarily the larger movements and experiences. We're experts in our own lives and lived experiences and our own strategies that have worked or not worked. And so I wanted to just also name that so that we're not feeling like we are representing a whole group of people or communities. I think we're really showing up as community members that are engaged and immersed, but also representative of our own personal experience so that we're able to have some authenticity in that space. So really appreciate that. As we're thinking about this work, I'm so excited that we are in this moment. And I know people are like, why are you excited? Because I feel like people are actually finally waking up to things that many of us who have marginalized that they have known for centuries. And I think there's a much larger movement and a much larger collective, not even an awakening, because I think people should have known earlier, but I think there's a recognition that there's some deep-seated issues that need to happen. And so really, I think for me, my first question, as you all are doing this work, how are you doing and how are you making sense of what's happening in the world right now? Everything from the pandemic to racial justice to LGBTQ rights to civil rights to global trafficking to all the different issues that are out there. How are you doing and how are you making sense of it? And I know also that not all of us will be able to respond to all the questions because we only have about 40 minutes or so, but wanted to make sure that we put that out there.
I am very lucky right now to be working full-time with youth. I work with teenage boys in a level 14 short-term residential therapeutic program. So I see the world through their eyes and how much change is happening and how much adults as well are becoming more aware of cultural change, social justice, all this stuff. And I just am blessed that I get to work with kids and see through their eyes. So that's how I'm doing right now. I see the world through their eyes, and we go out to protests and we learn about the world. So I get to see it through our youth.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What a gift. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that work. Other folks. Yeah, Sunhee.
So I am currently a rising senior at USC. So the pandemic interrupted my spring semester, and I'm in Denver, Colorado, and I moved back after everything went to Zoom University. So my life has been a little bit chaotic, readjusting to a new school system, and I've been doing okay, I think. I'm really happy that my immediate family is safe, and that they're all healthy right now, because that's something that's, I think, on everyone's mind. But personally, I've been dealing with things, taking it one day at a time and just letting myself feel whatever I'm feeling that day. I kind of oscillate between highly motivated and totally overwhelmed. And right now I've been focusing a lot on Elijah McClain since I was born in Aurora, Colorado.
Thank you for naming and bringing him into the spirit. I appreciate it. And I think also there's a play to be written about Zoom University, just FYI. Bringing the playwrights out there.
I so much content.
Elvira, were you going to share something?
Oh my goodness, about what she said about being overwhelmed and oh my goodness. I try to take on so much because I'm just so fired up over how the world is finally, a good portion of the world is listening and is waking up. And I just want to jump in there and do, help do the work and do the work for myself, first of all, starting with my own family and having hard conversations. And then the other things that I can do through art, like I was explaining before, through producing cabaret or helping other artists who maybe are new to it and they want a voice and they want to maybe use that platform. So helping direct them and coach them through that, so that as a way to assist them and give them that, empower them to do that. But also I have, a lot of people don't know that I have some autoimmune disorders. So I guess I would fit into the invisible disabilities kind of world. And you wouldn't know it from my singing, dancing, and running around and all the energy I have, but it's been really difficult now. And I imagine it is for a lot of people with these kind of autoimmune disorders, that all the stress from pandemic and social injustice and the fact that we'd like to do more, but we can't, it's just so much. And so that flares up conditions. So for me, I've been doing a lot of writing, a lot of texting, and my hands have been just swollen in the joints and dislocating. So for me, it's just trying to navigate this new existence with the body and the issues that I have, and accepting that at least for me, I have to pick and choose which battles I want to fight and which ones I'm able to fight, and that I have to give myself permission to just do one or two things. I think as long as I'm doing something toward the betterment of our world, our collective experience, then I've come now in the past week to terms with that. So that's been a challenge for me emotionally, mentally, and yeah.
Yeah, no, that totally makes
It's
sense.
a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah. How do we make sense of the different roles that we can play in social change, right? I think, there's often like, oh, you have to be on the front lines, or you have to get arrested like Megan, or you have to do X, Y, Z, or else you're not a good activist. I also see quite a bit of that.
Yes.
And yet
yes.
there's so
There's
many
a lot of
other, but there's also so many different ways. So I don't know if you're familiar with Deepa Iyer's social change ecosystem. And so really talks about all the different roles that people play in how we create change, because we need the healers, we need the visionary, we need the people that are actually on the front line, we need the people that are supporting the people that are on the front line, and all these different, and how we do that and how we show up, and we need the artists and the creators to do that as well. Yeah, so that makes sense. Thank you for naming that. Yeah. Anyone else want to? How are you doing? How are you making sense of the world right now?
It's been interesting to. I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, it's been overwhelming," and it's been hard to have difficult conversations. And as a Black person, I'm just like, really? You guys you're just now dealing with this, really?
Right.
Centuries in the world, 400 years here. And so it's been an interesting. It's been interesting to feel the empathy finally from people who are just now becoming awake to what I, as a person of color, of deep color, have known my whole life. So I don't feel overwhelmed. I'm a little inspired. I probably oscillate like Sunhee between angry and then amused and determined and then disgusted. But the one thing I'm not is overwhelmed. This is not new. What we are going through is not a new phenomenon. It's just nice to be seen finally on some level.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. I appreciate that. Yeah, Jenapher.
I didn't want to speak on myself, but I did want to say that in some ways I feel that the pandemic has led to a coalesced voice. I definitely don't think that the surge that the movement has gotten would have been possible if not for everyone being caged up indoors. I think in a certain sense, like, this pandemic is calling us to question all the systemic institutions that have failed us thus far, from healthcare to dealing with racism, to dealing with the subtler realities of racism that we see pervasive in every part of society. So I think this is a good time to finally be upset about it, and I'm having hope from seeing many different institutions actually make some kind of effort. I mean, of course, it's, a question of whether or not that's enough is going to come up later, but the fact that people are jumping on the bandwagon to at least speak about it so that it's in the public consciousness, that gives me hope.
Yeah, thank you. And I think just also, I think we haven't actually named George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Elijah McClain or all these voices who, due to their death have actually served as a catalyst, which should not have had to happen, period. And I also am glad that we're actually doing something about actually making sure that, saying their name is so important. I know I come from a tradition where remembering our ancestors is a critical part of the way we do the work and the way we thrive and ground the futures by knowing our past. And I think to Trance's to comment earlier of like, this is not something new. This is centuries of oppression and systemic racism, systemic sexism, systemic homophobia, transphobia that is manifesting in ways that I do believe. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was talking to a friend. I was like, something feels different about this. There's some reason the universe is making us go through this, and I do feel like there's at the deepest core of the universe, something is shifting, which is what is allowing for us to actually have this coalesce moment, like you said. Of solidarity and actual conscious engagement in this work. So I'm always an optimistic person. So I'm like, I think I'm just more hopeful and optimistic that there will actually be strategic change. And we're seeing that already, which is pretty badass. B, were you going to say something?
Oh, yes, I wanted to reiterate what everyone has said, and also add that I think that this moment for me, and I'm sure for everyone else, is a reminder that we have to do away with this false dichotomy that being an artist is in conflict with being an activist, and that it's totally possible for all of us to be both and to be both at the same time always, because the very act of being an artist is inextricably intertwined with who and what we are. And like we know that like art has a psychosocial function. We know this from the ways that films have been made in the past and art has been made in the past to express certain moral processes, to understand past traumas. And so for this reason, I just think that that also needs to be reiterated, that for me and for many artists, this is a moment for us to step up and to use art as an agent of social change.
Yeah, thank you. I see Megan and then Nardeep.
I just wanted to say that as a white person, I've been looking for my place in all of this and where I can be the most helpful. And so that's kind of like shifted as my perspective keeps growing. So first, like the thing that made the most sense is to be out in the street. So I was just out in the street as much as I could, be protesting as much as I had energy for. And then, I was signing all the petitions, like that this is going to be my thing. I'm going to just post about all the petitions and sign them all. And then I sort of had I think I had some kind of ego that I hadn't worked through yet, where I thought that my experience of what I was doing was more important than what it was, than how it was affecting other people. And so then I had to learn how to listen in a way that I thought that I knew how to. I learned like a deeper level of listening that I'm still processing, and that has been like harder than I thought, because I thought I kind of had done that work, but there's still work to be done. So I also wanted to say that where I kind of landed is in this like interesting position of making art on a Zoom virtual platform, raising as much money as possible. I realized that like I actually have like a weirdly unique position of being able to raise a lot of money with my friends. We're all sort of weird burlesque performance artists, and we have a deep connection to our customer base, and we're making a lot of money and we're donating most of it. And so like I'm really proud to say that like I feel like that is my calling right now, is like to use what I am able to, which is my body and my performance art and the element of striptease and sexuality, to actually like put money in the organizations that need it, And so that's been like, I feel like the most effective change that I've been able to do so far. And like we've raised over $5,000 in the past 2 weeks and given it to like a lot of local organizations. That feels really important. And so I've been growing with that, and that's been teaching me a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, really, and like I think taking stock of where can we have influence, what is our sphere of influence, what is our impact base, how do we do, we got to do something. What is that? And I think for some people that is, I got to take care of myself right now, particularly a lot of our Black and brown folks in our families, right? Like, and that itself, if that's what you can do, or what you need to do, that's more than enough. And for those who have the ability to do more, whether it's having a conversation with them, whether it's utilizing platforms to raise money, whether it's, so really understanding that there's, it goes back to our earlier comment of like, there's so many different ways to be a part of the movement. You just have to be a part of it and be intentional about it, not just put your head under the water and hope that it goes away. Yeah. How about Nardeep?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been talking about and seeing is this kind of concept of like sustainability in this movement, and not letting it just be a moment, but making it a conscious sort of life choice that these are things that we're going to be fighting for. And it's made me fairly optimistic going to these protests and having these conversations and seeing people engage in a way that, I haven't seen them engaged before. And now they're teaching me things. And I'm like, that's dope. Yes, this should be a give and take. And I think that's the thing that gives me the most optimism right now, is just that I'm seeing this movement really become sustainable because of people's interaction and engagement with it, which is really uplifting to see.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think we are really centering anti-Blackness and anti-Asianness, given just the responses to the pandemic and the anti-Asian violence that's happening, and the systemic policing and violence against Black people in this country that has happened, but really has, like you all said, has taken center light at this point. How is this impacting how we show up in these? How do you think, how is anti-Blackness and anti-Asianness and racism and all the other isms, right? But we're really kind of centering race right now, but knowing that intersectionality is hard to not talk about that, the other identities as well. But how is that impacting how you all are able to engage in the arts? And what are the things that you're seeing in terms of work that needs to happen as a community, as an arts community? Where do we need to do the work to move our movements forward? Yeah, Dekontee.
I am finding that I'm able to use just like the companies and the theater companies I've been so privileged to work with over the last 5 years of my career, of like, they're willing to engage with me when I ask them questions about certain things. And like I talked to a theater, a huge theater out here in California, and I was like, I have questions. And they were willing to, he was just willing to sit, the artistic director was like, let's talk about it. And I was like, great, I want to know about this, I want to know about this, how can we figure out this? And like actually be not just feel like, oh, I'm an actor, I can't really engage with these people. Be like, I just feel more empowered to ask them questions about things and like question things, and like even going to, because I do, like, I have representation, and so I go to them and be like, okay, why is it that I don't get seen for certain things, and what are we doing to change that? And like, I know that you feel that way, that you want to give me a platform in every venue, no matter what I look like. What can we do to shift the conversation so that I can be in the rooms that I'm supposed to be in? And I just feel like there's more of a voice, and there's more of an engagement of like, how can we not just be seen as actors who are just like, I guess this is it, to be like more of actors who are like, no, actually there's more to this, and I demand more, and I deserve more, because I've trained really hard. I'm not just limited to like 3 roles. Like, I could do so many more things.
Right.
And on the flip side, I think it's empowered me to create my own table. Like, just be like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be welcome to this table, I'm going to create my own table. And whether or not you want to buy that table, I still have a table. And whoever wants to show up is welcome to sit down and eat with me. But like, if you don't want to come, that's fine. Yeah. And like, I've been writing and just like using like the resources that I have in front of me just to create something like all the time, and realizing that I have more in my wheelhouse than I actually didn't see before. If it wasn't for the pandemic and for what's going on, like the pandemic made you more creative. And then now it's like, oh, wow. Like now we're talking about the stuff that I've been wanting to talk about for my entire life.
Wow.
Let's merge the two.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm excited to see all the stuff that happens at your table, and I will come join your table, please. Other folks. Yeah, Tom. And then Jenapher. Sorry, I think I forgot the list.
Should I go first?
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, let's piggybacking off of that table. So I am in a position where I acknowledge that I have a privilege. I work with a great group of people for like 8 years. My theater company has been around, and although we're a small organization, we do the work that touches on, like I said before, intersectionality of culture, identity, and sexuality. And I have noticed and become more hyper aware due to what's currently happening, that the leadership that sits around the decision-making table directly influences the final product, especially if you're limited like we are. We can put up 1 to 2 productions a year. I would just extend that thought to major theaters that can do 5 to 6. But with that 1 to 2, that slot is taken by whatever decision is made by the people that sit around the table. And although the people that sit around the table for my theater company are diverse enough to be able to claim Asian Americanness, LGBTQ statuses, and identity affiliations, we have had a hard time figuring out why we can't diversify our offerings beyond just that scope. And we've always, or at least I've always assumed that the table was always there to invite everyone to come sit down and work on it. And because of this time, I have realized that it's not about, oh, the table is there, come sit with us. It is, I have to build the chairs for each person I want to invite as well. And how to do that, I don't have an answer yet. So my reaction and my relationship to what's been currently happening is more on an observer stance. Where I can do the work, I can go out and protest and document photos and do my part, but mostly I'm trying to find the pulse of what is the way to be more inclusive and to be more inviting and to create that table with the chairs.
Yeah.
Yes, using the analogy.
Right. So yeah, I think to Dekontee and Tom's point, it's both how do we grow the tables that already exist so that people can have voices there. If those are not, so how do you create more tables for other folks? And how do you create, it's both, right? It's like, I think about the civil rights movement would not be what it is if it was not for Malcolm X and MLK doing the works that then strategies they did collaboratively together, but in very different platforms to be able to actually push the organizations forward. So thank you for that. Jenapher.
Hi, I've recently been thinking a lot about being an Asian person, being a light-skinned person, and how the model minority myth helps uphold white supremacy in arts institutions as well. So being a art school alumnus, I recently heard a story from a Twitter thread by Jeremy O. Harris, who wrote Slave Play on Broadway. And he talked about his experiences as a Black man working under the Yale institution under Young-Jing Lee's tutelage. Young-Jing Lee, as we know, is a famous Asian American playwright. And he had a terrible experience there. And he depicted his experience through that Twitter thread about how the institution failed to support him as a Black person. And that led to him writing this new play called Yell, which is about the silence of institutions and the failure of arts institutions in upholding their Black students. So thinking about that, I guess like I've just been calling things into question, like not only do we, like as Tom said, need to fill up seats in artistic leadership with BIPOC folks, we also need to be cognizant about how our particular identities relate and could potentially blind us to the issues at the forefront of the movement. I also personally believe we have to extend our activism beyond the arts too, because without major systemic change, we will not see change in the theater as well. I don't believe that arts change can happen in a vacuum. I don't think that filling up those seats with BIPOC folks, including producer seats with BIPOC folks, can happen overnight if there isn't a radical redistribution of wealth in this country and of resources.
Yeah, so I might be answering kind of both your questions from how we're doing and sort of the platforms that we're going through, but I wanted to kind of go back to Elvira's point at the beginning when she talked about discussing it even with her own family. I think for myself as an artist, maybe for all of us, I'm Los Angeles based, but raised in Minnesota. And so now I'm back here in Minnesota with my folks. And it's been a strange time to be back home in these communities that I grew up in. And what happened to George Floyd last month, these are the communities that I grew up in. These are the people that I grew up with. But like Elvira's point, for myself right now as an artist, it's to actually kind of dig in deep with myself, because I'm quarantined with my parents and my brother, but I'm actually bringing about those difficult conversations and questioning how I was raised as a kid. Because when you see all this violence going on in the world, I have to ask, like, where did it possibly begin? Where did it start? And so I had the difficult conversations with my folks in understanding, like, the physical discipline. Where did that come from? I mean, we know it as spankings, right? And so I had to have that difficult conversation with them in looking at, is that introducing some sort of abuse in somebody's life at a young age, that when they grow up, they just think it's okay? You know what I'm saying? It's like, when I see chokeholds around people, it's like, how do they think that works? Why does that work? Because it doesn't. And so I'm really like, and I'm glad Elvira talked on that, I'm going back with my own folks and understanding not only discipline, but our faith. Like, what are we taught in our faith, in the Christianity faith and all that, is that, at least for myself, I never questioned it. I never asked questions about my own faith that I was raised in. And whose lens is through that? Who's telling them that that's the right thing to believe in? And I think there's a direct correlation, like Jenapher talked about earlier, this idea of being quarantined. It's the biggest lockup in the entire world. Everybody's locked up, whether it's in your mind or physical. Everyone's locked up. You can go outside if you want, but then you'll meet people that are wearing masks, not wearing masks, people holding up signs for the Black Lives Matter movement, people against it. It's the biggest prison lockup of all time. And so that's why it makes you, for me, it makes me reflect inside of, okay, where did it start with my own people, with my own family? And then how can I go up the steps with, okay, I'll have these discussions with them, and then maybe start to kind of swim out in the water and have the discussions elsewhere. Now, I know I went on some tangents there, but I that's where I'm at right now in my mind.
We got to do our own work first, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Elvira and then Ashford.
Hi, I wanted to respond to that. That work with the family is so hard. A couple of things, all of us being all locked up, we're all losing something. It's making us really, really uncomfortable. And it's, you know, our egos or whatever, it becomes a me, I'm missing this, I don't have this, I don't have that, and it becomes a big tragic thing. And I've heard friends, I've family members, and say things like that. And my response to that has been, okay, let's approach this from, like, you know how uncomfortable that is. Now let's bring compassion into this and try to, you know, think about what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. And the fact that they have discomfort and they live in this discomfort and in this existence of not having this or not having that. And it's not new. It's been going on their entire lives. It's been going on for decades. It's been going on for centuries. There's that. I've been doing that. And the whole thing with being at home with families and in older generations where it's a different way of living, it's a different way of thinking. There are things you don't talk about. I think we all know what I'm talking about here. You know, you keep your business to yourself. You don't question things. You don't question your elders. I think I was a pretty good girl growing up. I mean, I wasn't like a lot of trouble for my parents, but I did question a lot. And I did ask, why are you saying things like this? Why are you, when they would complain about things about, you know, how brown people are treated. I'm a lighter skinned brown person. So it doesn't escape me that comes with some privileges, you know, and that it's been afforded to me and to my family, but it also hasn't. And during these times with what's happening with police brutality and other injustices that are not new, it's also not new in my world. I mean, I've personally witnessed that with my brother being harassed, with my father being profiled and harassed. There's a lot of anger that's coming up, and they don't want to talk about it. And I keep saying, why? You have to understand that this is going to keep happening if we continue to stay silent. You have to say enough is enough. And you also have to understand that for brown people, whether you're, and for brown people, you've got people who are immigrants, you've got people who have been here for many, many generations, that we don't necessarily consider ourselves immigrants, or, you know, we're very mixed people. But I think more what I'm hearing it more, I think, from immigrant communities and first, second generations that are complaining about, and have all the right to complain about mistreatment and injustice in the workplace, in education, everything. And I would like to invite that conversation, to ask that question, why is this happening? You have to understand it's happening to you because it's happened for hundreds of years to our Black brothers and sisters, our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and we're living in societies where it's okay. That behavior has been okay, and so therefore that is why you were treated the way you're treated. So understand where that is coming from and start using your voice to say enough is enough, and understand why it is so important for you to get in that fight as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's got united. We're going to change things. You cannot just be like, this isn't my problem. You know, this is a Black person problem. This is an Asian person problem. That is so short-sighted.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Our liberation is intersected, right? Are intertwined and interconnected. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ashford? And then Lindsay.
Thank you. So one thing that I've been personally like struggling with as a whole is I recognize like how privileged I am and how privileged I've been in an artistic community. My dad, taught me African American history. He gave me extra books in school. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University, where we spent a lot of time doing devised theater and like really important political pieces that were happening in the city up in Richmond. And then I moved out here and I started working with East West Players, and I recognized like I've been in this bubble of like activism, and like obviously we're talking about intersectionality. Yes, racism exists. Like these things were truths in all the communities that I have been in. And it's been such a blessing to be able to be surrounded by artistic people who like, we're here to make the best show that we possibly can. We are here to be able to create art. Like we're all here because of the whole process. And no matter what our positions are and where we are, like for the director, all the way down, not all the way down, but like, even like just working as a wardrobe supervisor, we're all important. And even my assistants. And we've always had the sense of like level of like we are equal, even though we are, working in different aspects, and that sense of community. I've been very fortunate to deal with that. And as I've been going out and working at different theaters and showing up at a theater, I'm one of 5 Black people or people of color as a whole working on an entire production. And it was like I needed a reminder that this is actually still happening, and there's still serious levels of disenfranchisement and like underrepresentation. And like I forgot, I was like, obviously we're making progress because I'm working at nonprofits all the time, and I'm like, yeah, there's things happening, right? And then I see it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not recognize, not like that we're necessarily in a sense far behind, but it made me recognize that I had been in a very positive bubble, and that there were so many things that still needed to be done, and there was so much work that still had to happen. And it's like I forgot. I was just so, things are beautiful and we love each other. And so it's given me such a great time to sort of reflect on that, and also sort of see what the other sides are talking about, where their perspectives are coming from, how friends that have that are white or European descent, they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it, like watching this reaction happen and being as supportive as I can during that time. And also watching how I really enjoyed watching people be like, I'm going to educate the people of my culture, and watching other white people say, I want to help educate my own community as well. And that, and also learning when to take a step back, because I know that this conversation probably needs to happen here first, just before I can come and be like, yeah, of course, this has been happening since forever. Like, I don't want to be like, you're late. Like, that's not it. The whole point is to help that process and to be a good supporter. And also just reminding myself that people do have different opinions, and what can I do to help that journey, and also my own journey of recognizing where my own, biases are in. And even that sense of like I don't want to be racist against other cultures, and I don't want to make assumptions about a different culture and be like, oh, only if I get it from this culture, it's only going to be the best. Like, I want to find a way to be able to understand so that I can help create the change that I personally think needs to happen in this world.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it makes me think of something that I've been calling compassionate accountability. How do we show grace to people? The fact that people are learning at different places of their process, but it's like, y'all still need to do shit. You got to do something and not just say, oh, I don't know, and then just sit there. You have to actually continue to do something and learn and actually shift behavior to demonstrate you're actually caring about it. Yeah, thank you. How about Lindsey? And then we'll go to Sunhee.
I just wanted to share my personal experience with anti-Blackness and anti-Asianness within the arts. I'm half Black and half Asian, so I kind of can see both sides of the coin there. I can remember all the way back to when I started in the business. Like, I was 6 years old. I was up for a national spokesperson, and like, it was about to happen, and then they told me, we're going to go in a different direction. And when we asked why, they said, the country just isn't ready for a Black person to be like the spokesperson, and I'm worried that it's going to damage our sales, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm a little kid, so I didn't really think much of it. I was like, okay, on to the next audition. But that kind of stuck with me throughout my whole life now as I grew and started to think about it more. And I think it's just our job to sort of end also these stereotypes that follow each of us throughout our lives, and that are portrayed on the screen. Because in reality, like, a small percentage of us actually fit into those stereotypes. And I'm sure you could find people from all different backgrounds that fit into each of those stereotypes. Like, not every Black person is ghetto. You can find ghetto people everywhere. And I just think it's time for us to make a stand and to stop accepting these roles that perpetuate this hate. And like, I remember a few years ago, I got sent out on an audition for a thing called like Ratchet Club or something. And that's so like not me. Like, and I told my manager, like, this just isn't me. I can't act for this part. And if you actually took the time to get to know me, you would know the type of roles that I would actually like and that I would do well at, So I think and I refused to go on that audition. I was like, I'm not doing this. So I think it's time for us to just have those conversations with our representation, sit down and just tell them that it's not okay to just send us out on things that you think we might fit because of the way we look. Instead, think of how we act, how we portray ourselves, and gear our auditions more towards who we are as a person instead of what we look like.
Yeah, thank you for a lot of that knowledge dropping. I appreciate it. Definitely, like, yeah, you said it beautifully. How about Sunhee?
Yeah, I just want to snaps to everything that you just said. I had a role a couple weeks ago where we were comparing notes, and it was like every brown and Black woman under the sun had gone out for the same role, and it was so clear that they didn't really care about actually looking for the proper actor. They just like wanted that melanin tone or whatever they think is the way to represent people, and I totally relate to that frustration. And I think as an actor, especially, I have always felt this way, but I'm now, I think, far more steadfast than I was in the past. that we have the right to refuse these roles that are clearly harmful, and that there is enough to go around for all of us, and that the right roles are out there. So we have the power to say no and to kind of stop it in its tracks. But yeah, I also wanted to tag on to what Jenapher was saying about education. I'm someone who has come up through predominantly white institutions my entire life. So I've so often been the only person of color in the room, or the only Asian person in the room. And I think, especially being at USC right now, finally talking about, in terms of the art schools, who they're servicing, the types of storytelling they privilege, and especially to go to the School of Cinematic Arts at USC, which is, considered one of the best, whatever, that there's a lot that we have to do. And being a media scholar, it's such a white circle, and it's that, like, the white ivory tower of people who think that their opinion is the only right opinion. So it has been incredibly gratifying to finally hear these people listen to the students of color who have not been properly serviced or taught or supported by the school, and the actors who are all speaking out now about the selections of plays and the types of teaching that happens in the classroom around diversity, and how these white students often fail to support their other students of color. But something I've also been dealing with a lot is, I'm a dancer, and I am very involved in the SoCal competitive dance community, which formerly called itself the urban dance community up until this point. And we have been having very important conversations about terminology, about history, talking about technique, and how often in the dance community in America, we tend to privilege Western techniques as being somehow more complex or harder to learn, which is untrue. And talking about why we need to move past the term urban. And it's kind of interesting to be in a community right now that is trying to rename itself and redefine itself and reground itself in the acknowledgement that it only exists because of Black culture. And I think that has been so important, and something that really hasn't happened. And I also would encourage, if anyone is interested, checking out the Instagram handle Black at USC. There's a lot of Instagrams that are coming out with this now of Black people recounting microaggressions and other oppressions that they have faced at predominantly white institutions. And it's stunning to read some of the things that happen in classrooms. And some of the things have also happened to me. So it's just very gratifying, and it also kind of lights the fire under your ass of, like, this fight is so far from over. There's so many everyday things that we still need to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think part of what I've been doing, sorry, I feel like I'm talking for a really long time, but also talking about vulnerability, because I think there are so many people right now who are really scared to share and to speak up because they feel like they don't know enough. And I definitely have been one of those people, but I think I'm coming to the conclusion of, like, I will speak to what I know, and then I will also share what I'm learning. Because I think that's the best way to encourage people to get started, because if they don't feel like they can share the learning process, especially being a kid on social media where everything is supposed to be some sort of final perfect product, sharing the learning, and that it always happens and never stops, and that as an Asian person, I'm uniquely positioned to talk about the model minority and anti-Blackness and how those relate, and that I can continue to do that while continuing to learn.
Yeah, thank you, Sunhee. Definitely the both and. B.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to something as well, connected to my own ethnic identity as Hmong American. I'm also from the Twin Cities area, so George Floyd's murder means a lot to the community there. And I wanted to address the very notion that, like, we have convinced ourselves that we are living in a moment of scarcity, when it's actually a moment of abundance and excess and pluralism. And I think that so much of what has been happening in the Twin Cities, and with me having conversations with family members, I think back to the time when I acted in Gran Torino opposite Clint Eastwood in the lead role. And I think often about how that film, when it was released into the mainstream, provided a way for Hmong Americans to process the war in Laos and the war during the Vietnam War, in the ways that it provided us a language to talk about Hmong identity and the Asian American identity. And I think about the moment of George Floyd's murder by the hands of police officers, one of them being Too Tall, who is Hmong American, and the ways that our own training and our education and our ideas about ourselves have failed other communities of color, particularly Black Americans. And I think often about like schools as well. I graduated from Brown and Ivy League. I often think about how these institutions are brokers, knowledge brokers, and the ways that interfaces with our social reality. I think that this is a moment for us to learn because so much of storytelling is driving the understanding that is absence in the place of schools and white institutions that are clearly colonized in ways that are beyond our control, in ways that inculcate us into believing a certain way and to believing that this is a moment of scarcity when it's actually a moment of excess and abundance. For that reason, I think Andy and I actually, I remember recounting a story with Andy Lowe about how when I was at the University of Minnesota, there was a professor who got into this moment of teaching in which she said something along the lines of, did you know that during the Peloponnesian Wars, if the Persians had won and the Greeks had lost, art would have never existed. Plays would have never existed. Of course, that was the problem of defaulting on a very Orientalist notion of what art is and of Islam and of the Orient, of course. And I often think about the ways that these institutions fail us, and then the way that it trickles down to, moments where Hmong Americans failed and failed horribly, and where we have to continue engaging in conversations and express acts of compassion. I forget what your terminology was earlier, but compassion.
Compassionate accountability.
Compassionate accountability, yeah. So I think for me, that's been one of the things that I've been learning to have to grapple with, and sort of pointing to the ways that art and storytelling is the way that can drive social change and understanding outside of our own, limited scope of education and training.
Yeah. Thank you, B. I mean, the systemic piece, right? The fact that especially even these institutions that you talk about were built by enslaved people for the purpose of westernizing and Christianizing indigenous people in this land, right? Even just knowing that history and knowing the ways that we have systemically dehumanized certain populations is critical to the undoing of the frameworks that we even used to exist within. And then for me, I think colonization is a huge issue also that needs to be addressed, and capitalism and all the systems, right? But I think all of you talk about how we can do the work individually and have access to power and privileges, like Ashford talked about, and also our ability to build consciousness, right? To write consciousness, to actually tell the story. I think for me, artists are storytellers. I know many of you have talked about that, and storytelling intentionally with a purpose and to frame the conversation is really important. We have just a few minutes left. I know we're way beyond what we thought we were going to talk, the time that we were going to talk about, but I mean, with so many brilliant minds, I'm not surprised. Is there anyone that has not had a chance to share anything that would like to share any wisdom into the space before we wrap up the conversation? Yeah, Reena.
Yeah, I love how articulate everybody is, and positive and optimistic, and it's beautiful and exciting. We've been struggling with the same conversations over and over again since I got here as an actor in 1998. And it's been the same conversations every year with new people, the same people who've been here for generations before me. I'm excited about the pandemic and all the issues that we're facing, because as an early career director, I was brought into a couple different institutions this year to direct stage plays, and it's been interesting to have the conversation pre-pandemic about what diversity means on my stage and why I want it on my stage. It's extra exciting in a very angering way to see who is actively making change happen, who's changing their systemic reality within their theater companies. And it's empowering to know that there's an entire community that's willing to stand behind me if I speak up. Historically, everyone's scared of the angry brown girl, which has happened over and over and over again. You have to speak with kindness. You have to speak with, obviously empathy is everything for anything we do. And even just living day to day. But it's exciting to be able to make a stance and be angry about it and start writing down names, holding people actually accountable for what they say they're going to do. And then in 1 year, if it's still not done, having the ability to say, well, this is what you said a year ago. So what's going to change? What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And truthfully do that. And truthfully hold people accountable. I don't think
Yeah.
anger is a bad thing in this situation.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. The accountable. Did someone else have something to? Trance. Okay, Trance is gonna be our last comment person, and then we're gonna take a quick picture, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, so it seems to me, in terms of if we're looking for solutions, and the bottom line of solutions is, if your boardroom is all white, fix it. If your production team is all white, fix it. If your teaching, the decision makers at any institution is all anything, fix it. Like, and it's not enough to just say we see you. We don't want to be seen over there. We want to be in the room, as Tom was talking about. We want to own the chairs. We want to contribute to the chairs so that we are all making decisions. And you don't have to have all these things happening because you weren't aware that was offensive, or you weren't aware that was racist, or that was sexist, that was misogynist. You didn't have to be aware because you had somebody in the room who could tell you in the moment, that's not cool. Don't do that.
Right.
Why don't you consider this? So I think we just need to put people in the room, let them own the room as well as other people, whatever the institution is.
Right. Well, I think, and Trance, so you bring up this point also, that assuming that because we are people of color, that we are not good enough to be in the room otherwise, is also like naming the fact that like just our identities are barriers because of the system, and that the fact that we're not in there is not because of anything that we have done, it's because the system doesn't see our work and talent as worthy, as I think Dekontee said earlier. And so even just shifting the frameworks that we're thinking about is really critical. Thank you all just incredibly so much. I just feel blessed to have shared the space with you and the wisdom and engagement and resources. Again, thank you to East West Players and Andy Lowe and Simon for this incredible conversation, the series that we've done. I want to just take a quick picture. So put your best smiles on if you can for me. Awesome. And just it's lots of gratitude, lots of support and solidarity for this work. I'm excited for continued conversations. I'm probably going to pitch this to Andy I think we need to come back and have more dialogue and more discussion because there's so much wisdom here. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for existing. I want to just leave you with a quote by a friend of mine, J. Bob Alada, who says, may our liberty be our greatest act of love. And so thank you all for this space and have a wonderful rest of the day. And let's continue to do this work. Thank you.